What the Federal Bureau of Investigation, one of the most credible, most authoritative, and most technically sophisticated law enforcement and intelligence agencies in the United States, an organization whose warnings about digital security threats are based on the deepest available intelligence about criminal and state, sponsored cyber operations targeting American citizens, and whose public advisories about phone security settings represent the distillation of intelligence about active threats that the FBI's own investigations and the broader American intelligence community's surveillance of criminal and foreign state cyber operations have identified as posing genuine and immediate risk to ordinary smartphone users, has just issued as an urgent public warning about a specific hidden phone setting that the FBI is explicitly and emphatically telling every smartphone user in America to turn off immediately, is not the kind of routine cybersecurity advisory that government agencies issue periodically as a matter of standard public service communication about theoretical risks that most ordinary people are unlikely to encounter in their daily digital lives. It is a specific, evidence-based, urgency-driven warning grounded in the FBI's direct knowledge of active criminal and state-sponsored exploitation of this specific setting that is currently happening at scale against ordinary American smartphone users whose phones have this setting enabled and who have no idea that the setting exists, that it is turned on by default on their device, that it is being actively exploited by the criminals and the foreign intelligence operatives whose methods the FBI is monitoring, or that turning it off is one of the most important and most immediately protective steps they can take right now to reduce their exposure to a digital security threat that the FBI has determined is serious enough, widespread enough, and immediately dangerous enough to warrant a public warning of the directness, the urgency, and the specificity that the FBI's current advisory represents, the setting that the FBI is warning about, and the specific nature of this warning coming from the FBI rather than from a cybersecurity company with a commercial interest in alarming the public. About threats that their products claim to address gives the warning a credibility and an authority that demands attention from every smartphone user, regardless of their normal level of engagement with digital security issues, is a setting whose existence on most smartphones is unknown to the vast majority of the people whose devices have it enabled, whose potential for facilitating unauthorized access to device data, device functions, and the personal and financial information that modern smartphones contain has been documented by cybersecurity researchers, but not communicated to the general public with the prominence and the urgency that the scale of its exploitation now warrants, and whose disabling represents a protective action of immediate and concrete benefit for every smartphone user who follows the FBI's advice and takes the 30 seconds or less that turning off this setting requires to meaningfully reduce their exposure to the threat that has prompted the FBI's warning. To understand why the FBI has issued this specific warning about this specific phone setting at this specific moment, you need to understand the broader context of the cybersecurity threat landscape that has prompted an unprecedented level of urgency. In the FBI's public communications about digital security threats targeting ordinary Americans, a landscape characterized by the convergence of increasingly sophisticated criminal cyber operations targeting consumer devices and consumer financial accounts, increasingly aggressive foreign state-sponsored cyber operations targeting American citizens' devices and communications for intelligence collection and influence operations, and the proliferation of commercially available hacking tools and surveillance technologies that have dramatically lowered the technical barrier to conducting device compromise operations against ordinary people who are not the high-profile targets of traditional espionage, but who carry on their smartphones the personal data, the financial access, the communication records, and the location information that criminal actors and foreign intelligence services find valuable for a wide range of malicious purposes. The specific setting that the FBI's warning identifies falls into a category of smartphone functionality that device manufacturers have enabled by default to support a range of convenience features and connectivity options that most users value and use regularly. But that creates a persistent and exploitable security vulnerability whose existence and whose exploitation most users are completely unaware of, because the convenience benefits of the enabled setting are immediately apparent and continuously experienced, while the security costs of the enabled setting are invisible until the moment that a criminal or a surveillance operator exploits the vulnerability the setting creates to access the device in ways the owner never authorized and never imagined were possible. USB debugging, one of the specific settings that security researchers and the FBI have identified as a commonly overlooked but significantly exploitable smartphone security vulnerability, is a developer-oriented feature that, when enabled on an Android device, allows a connected computer to issue commands directly to the device's operating system through the device's USB connection, bypassing the normal user interface and the normal permission structures that protect the device's data and its functions from unauthorized access. a capability that Android developers use legitimately to test applications, to debug software, and to access detailed system information during the development process, but that when enabled on a non-developer's device, creates a pathway through which anyone who gains physical access to the device and connects it to a specially configured computer can extract data from the device, install software on the device, access files and communications that the device owner considers private and secure, and conduct a range of other unauthorized operations that the USB debugging interface's direct operating system access makes possible, without the normal security checks that protect device data from unauthorized access through the standard user interface. The USB debugging vulnerability is particularly dangerous in the context of the public charging station threat that the FBI has been warning about for several years. The threat that public USB charging stations in airports, hotels, shopping centers, and other public locations may have been compromised by criminal actors who have installed hardware or software between the USB charging port and the power supply that intercepts the data connection that USB cables carry simultaneously with the power connection, using the data connection to access devices connected for charging through the USB debugging interface if it is enabled, extracting data and potentially installing malicious software on the device during what the device owner believes is simply a routine charging stop. The Bluetooth settings that the FBI warning encompasses, specifically the combination of having Bluetooth enabled continuously, having the device set to be visible or discoverable to other Bluetooth devices, and having the automatic connection settings configured to connect to known Bluetooth devices without requiring explicit user confirmation of each connection, create a wireless attack surface that criminal actors and state-sponsored hackers have been exploiting through a range of Bluetooth-based attack techniques that include Blueborn, a class of Bluetooth vulnerabilities that allows attackers within Bluetooth range to take control of a device without any user. Interaction, or pairing, bluebugging, an attack technique that allows unauthorized access to a device's communications and controls through a Bluetooth connection, and bias attacks that exploit vulnerabilities in the Bluetooth authentication protocol to establish unauthorized connections with target devices by impersonating previously paired devices that the target device is configured to connect to automatically. The location services settings that the FBI warning addresses, specifically the combination of having location services enabled for a large number of applications, having the precise location option enabled rather than the approximate location option, and having location history enabled on applications and platform services that aggregate and store location data over time, create a comprehensive location tracking apparatus that builds a detailed and historically rich record of the device owner's movements, routines, home address, work location, frequently visited places, and daily patterns of movement and activity that represents one of the most sensitive and most personally revealing categories of data that a smartphone generates, and that criminal actors, stalkers, foreign intelligence services, and data brokers all have strong interest in obtaining. Turning off precise location access for applications that have no legitimate need for it, disabling location history on platform services that aggregate location data over time, regularly reviewing and revoking location permissions for applications that have accumulated location access without the user's careful consideration of whether that access is genuinely necessary for the application's core function, and enabling the approximate location option rather than the precise location option for applications where some location awareness is necessary, but where the precision of GPS-accurate location data is not required for the application to function as intended, together represent a year of location privacy improvements that significantly reduce the quantity and the sensitivity of the location data being generated by the device and available to the applications, the platform services, and potentially the unauthorized actors who might access that data through the various pathways that an inadequately secured smartphone creates. The Wi-Fi settings that contribute to the vulnerability profile that the FBI's warning is addressing include the automatic Wi-Fi connection settings that allow the device to connect automatically to any network whose name matches a previously used network without requiring the user to explicitly authorize each new connection, a feature that criminal actors exploit through the evil twin attack technique, in which a malicious Wi-Fi access point is configured with the same network name as a legitimate network that the target device has previously used, causing the device to connect automatically to the malicious network when it comes within range, allowing the attacker who controls the malicious network to intercept the device's internet traffic, to inject malicious content into unencrypted communications, and to conduct a range of man-in-the-middle attacks against the device's network communications that can expose sensitive information, including login credentials, financial transaction data, and personal communications, disabling the automatic Wi-Fi connection setting so that the device requires explicit user confirmation before connecting to any new network, regularly reviewing and removing saved networks from the device's list of remembered networks to eliminate the automatic connection, vulnerability for networks that are no longer regularly used, and using a reputable VPN service when connecting to any public or unfamiliar Wi-Fi network to encrypt the device's internet traffic and protect it from interception, regardless of whether the network is genuine or malicious, together represent the most important Wi-Fi security improvements that the FBI's warning implicitly recommends for users who want to close the Wi-Fi related attack surface that default smartphone settings create. The NFC settings near field communication, the short-range wireless technology that enables contactless payment features like Apple Pay and Google Pay, as well as a range of other proximity-based device interactions, create a security consideration that the FBI's warning encompasses, because NFC attacks, including NFC drip and related techniques, allow attackers in very close physical proximity to a target device to initiate unauthorized NFC interactions that can exploit vulnerabilities in the device's NFC implementation to execute unauthorized commands, access data stored in NFC accessible memory, or trigger device actions through malicious NFC tags embedded in posters, stickers, or other physical objects that the device owner might bring their phone close to in everyday environments. The process of implementing the security improvements that the FBI's warning recommends begins with a systematic review of every setting category that the warning addresses, working through the USB settings to disable USB debugging if it is enabled, reviewing and adjusting Bluetooth settings to disable continuous discoverability and automatic connection, reviewing and restricting location services, permissions on an application-by-application basis to ensure that only applications with legitimate and current need for location access retain that access, adjusting Wi-Fi settings to disable automatic connection and to use VPN protection for public network connections, and reviewing NFC settings to ensure that NFC is disabled when not in active use for contactless payment or other intended NFC functions. Taking these steps in response to the FBI's warning, treating the warning with the seriousness that the FBI's authority, the FBI's access to intelligence about active criminal exploitation of these settings, and the FBI's decision to issue a public advisory of this directness and this urgency together demand is the most immediately protective and most concretely beneficial response that every smartphone user can make to an advisory that represents the federal government's best current intelligence about the specific phone settings that are being actively exploited against ordinary Americans, and that turning off right now would meaningfully reduce the risk of unauthorized device access, data theft, financial compromise, and the full range of other harms that the exploitation of these settings by criminal actors and foreign intelligence operatives is currently causing to the smartphone users who have not yet heard this warning or not yet acted on it. The FBI does not issue public warnings of this specificity and this urgency without compelling reason. The decision to communicate directly to the American public about specific smartphone settings that should be turned off immediately reflects an assessment that the threat posed by the active exploitation of these settings is serious enough, widespread enough, and immediately dangerous enough that the protective benefit of informing the public outweighs the tactical consideration of not alerting the criminal and state-sponsored actors whose methods the warning describes. And that assessment should be taken as the serious and evidence-based communication from one of the world's most knowledgeable intelligence and law enforcement organizations about a genuine and immediate digital security threat that every smartphone user in America has both the right to know about and the means to immediately begin protecting themselves against by following the FBI's explicit recommendation to turn off the hidden phone settings that this warning is about. Like this video if this complete, detailed, and urgently actionable analysis of the FBI's warning about hidden phone settings that need to be turned off immediately gave you the understanding, the context, and the specific guidance you need to take this federal law enforcement warning with the seriousness it deserves, and to protect your smartphone and everything it contains from the active exploitation that the FBI's own intelligence has confirmed is targeting these specific settings on ordinary Americans' devices right now. Subscribe to this channel for the kind of serious, authoritative, and genuinely protective digital security content that every smartphone user needs in an environment where federal law enforcement agencies are issuing urgent public warnings about the phone settings that are being actively exploited against the American public. And tell me in the comments which of the settings mentioned in this video you found enabled on your device, and whether you were aware before watching this video that the FBI had issued a warning about these specific hidden phone settings. See you in the next one.